Hi, I'm Kitty Purgason, Professor Emerita from Biola University in Southern California. I'm talking about helping low-level students speak by adapting traditional textbook exercises. What if we have old or traditional textbooks, but we also have a mandate to develop our students' speaking skills? What if our textbooks are too difficult for some students or for many students? What if we have students who are reluctant to speak, or students who speak but need to be more accurate? But even if you have excellent new textbooks or great students, you can still use the activities I'm going to describe. I've chosen examples from these two textbooks. The first is for primary grades, the second for secondary. I found them in Tajikistan, but they're typical of books I've seen in many parts of the world. I'll be describing 5 types of activities. What's good about these activities? Well, first, they provide scaffolding for student speech. That is, they help the students move up to the next level. The activities are just a bit challenging, but not too difficult, and that leads to actual learning. Secondly, they help develop both accuracy and fluency. Our students will speak with fewer mistakes and also speak with more ease. Thirdly, they can be personalized for our students. We can use our student names, local places, and current interests. And teachers and students can add a bit of humor, making the practice more fun. These activities can be part of our repertoire as teachers, no matter what kind of textbook or students we have. Research into memory tells us we remember things that we repeat and practice. And we also remember things that are meaningful, emotional, surprising, and new. The activities we're talking about today allow us to include all these elements in our teaching. The first activity uses something common in most materials, dialogues. For example, this one from our sample textbook. The book has a 4-line dialogue, but I've chosen for my class activity to include only 2 lines to keep it simpler. That's important for low-level students. First, to introduce the dialogue, I use the finger technique. It is going to rain. It's going to rain. It's going to rain. It's going to rain. It's going to rain. Secondly, I do repetition, but I add a bit of drama. Your brother has headphones on. Say it loudly. It's going to rain. The baby is asleep. Say it quietly. It's going to rain. We need rain because of the drought. Say it happily. It's going to rain. We had plans for an outdoor wedding party. Say it angrily. It's going to rain. This way, the students have all that repetition they need to learn, but there's an element of fun and the unexpected. The next activity is a chant. The textbook has a short dialogue, and the instructions are read, act, and make up your own. Low-level students are unlikely to do this by themselves, so I change it to a chant and do it as the whole class. I've extended the dialogue, emphasizing stress, rhythm, and snap. What about watering the apple trees? All right, What about watering the strawberry plants? All right, all right. This is important because English is a stress-timed language. The stress on the syllable determines the rhythm of the sentence. Notice apple trees versus strawberry plants as we squeeze in unstressed syllables. To learn more about chants, just do an internet search for jazz chant, and you'll pull up examples, videos, webinars, and more. And knowing all that will help you create them from the material in your own textbook. When we do a jazz chant with low-level students, it's important to start slow. What about watering the apple trees? All right, all right. What about watering the strawberry plants? All right, all right. And then we can practice certain phrases or sections, like, what about? In my American dialect, there's a little flap there. What about? In your dialect, it might be, what about? But in any case, give the students some extra practice with all of those sounds. Or strawberry plants. Then we can go faster. What about watering the apple trees? All right, all right. What about watering the strawberry plants? I start choral with the whole class together, and then I get the class to chant in parts, question and answer style. And there might also be time for additions. What about watering the apricot trees? Or what about watering the watermelons? What about watering the cabbage plants? Here's another chant I created from some questions in the lower level book. Do you want to be a doctor? Yes, I do. Do you want to be whoops, let me get that clapping correct. Do you want to be a pilot? No, I don't. Of course, my mistake is a reminder that we need to practice this as teachers. Yes, you can find ready-made jazz chants online, but I wanted to show you what you can do with textbooks you are required to use. Now for the third activity. We see from this page that the textbook has a lot of food and meal-related vocabulary, adverbs of frequency, and simple present in table form. We can certainly use these tables to do choral drills with the whole class. For example, porridge. We usually have porridge for breakfast. Potatoes. We usually have potatoes for breakfast, and so on. And the drill can go on with the form, I never eat. Chicken, I never eat chicken. Beef, I never eat chicken. Or a slightly longer one, ice cream. She rarely eats ice cream in the evening. But I want to talk about another technique that gives students more personalized practice than a choral drill by using cue cards. First, vocabulary. I start with a list on the board. Some words come from the book, but not all. The book has the words sausages and steak, and I decide to skip them in my teaching context. I ask students for additional words that should be added, and they add these. Sometimes they want to talk about local food that they haven't learned in English, so they might check an online dictionary to see if the word has been adopted into English, like kebab, or if it needs to be translated. And the last step for vocabulary is that students choose 10 of all of these words on the board to use to write on cards. In the next stage, when students work in pairs, they will thus have a pile of 20 cards. Next, I put the model dialogue on the board. Students work in pairs. Everyone is talking at once, and I'm walking around the class listening. The students use their pile of cards to cue the sentences they make. For example, A picks a card from the pile. It says eggs. She says, "Have some eggs," to her partner. And B answers yes or no truthfully. Now it's B's turn to pick a card and ask A. She picks a card with coffee and says, "Have some coffee." A answers again truthfully, yes or no. "I'm sorry, I don't drink coffee." Yeah, it's essentially a drill, but because students are working in pairs, they're more likely to really be speaking, and it maximizes the amount of English students are using. Because the teacher and the students have selected relevant vocabulary, the practice is applicable to their lives. Because students can answer truthfully, the practice is more motivating. And your advanced students can even add additional comments such as, "Thank you. I prefer scrambled eggs if you have them." Or, "No, thank you. I'd rather have tea." Or, and so on. We can use the same cards to practice different sentence structures. Here's an example with he or she, a rather difficult aspect of English that students might be required to learn. Again, I put the model on the board. He usually has or doesn't have such and such a food for breakfast or in the evening or whatever. And for this activity, I include a picture or name. In this case, Rashid Khan, a famous Afghan cricket player. Again, pairs have a pile of cards. The cards are face down in a pile to make it more like a game, and they use those for practice. For example, student A picks the card T. I wonder, the student imagines. He usually has tea for breakfast. Now it's B's turn. He picks up cake from the pile. Again, they use their imagination. He usually doesn't have cake in the afternoon. Low-level students will simply make sentences from the model, but more advanced students might add something. He usually doesn't eat cake in the afternoon. No, I disagree. He plays cricket all day. He eats cake whenever he wants to. It's good to be ready with 3 to 5 different photos. So after a few minutes, I change the photo or the name, and the students shuffle the cards in a pile again to start the next round. The fourth activity can use either fill in the blanks or gap fills, as well as tables from the textbook. Here, the book is expecting that students will make sentences such as, "I heard the actor talk to the postman," or "Kareem heard the boy sing a new song." These sentences are not meaningful enough to stick in the students' minds. Let's see how we can personalize and localize such gap fills or activities with tables in order to give students more oral practice. I keep the target grammatical form, complex objects, but I brainstorm with the students about who they might hear and what they might hear, and I write their ideas on the board. Sometimes the students come up with a word like joke, but they need help in the correct verb or the object needed for that sentence pattern. And then I provide the model sentence and an example. Depending on the class level, I may give students a chance to try to make up sentences in small groups first, or I might just call on them to say a sentence. And here's the element of fun. The class votes on the sentence. So, I heard our neighbor yell at the kids. Yes, that's very likely. I heard the cat tell a joke. No, that's impossible. After students are comfortable with the sentence pattern, I cover up the options on the board and ask students to change the ending, making up their own. And in addition to voting on the scenario, the class can also give feedback on whether the sentence is correct English. For example, I heard Jamila to speak Japanese. Possible? Yes. Grammar? How's that? Not correct. It should be I heard Jamila speak Japanese. Here's an example from a textbook for younger learners. Doing it as it is in the book, yes, the students get to practice the verb be, but the sentences they make are boring. Is the duck yellow? Yes, it is. Are the monkeys funny? Yes, they are. So the students will turn off their minds. The English won't soak in, and the time will be wasted. The first step is to change this by adding a few more adjectives. Not too many, just enough to make the activity fun. It can be a good time to review previous vocabulary or add a word you think students will really enjoy learning. Next, the teacher cues a sentence. For example, duck, calls on a student and lets the student finish however they want to. Is the duck little? Is the duck scary? Okay, let's say the student has said, is the duck scary? Now, call on a student to respond. Is the duck scary? Yes, it's very, very big. Or, is the duck scary? No, it is a duck. Ducks are not scary. Now I'll clue the next student. Monkeys. Are the monkeys yellow? Respond. No, the monkeys are brown. Elephant. Is the elephant little? Respond. Yes, it is a baby. Yes, it is a toy elephant. That respond can be creative and imaginative. You can see that several elements have been added to this practice. One is a kind of creativity as students use their imagination. And another is fun as students may compete to make outlandish questions. And finally, there's a conversational element as the second student is asked to respond. It's time for the last of our activities. This is an activity to do with stories or other texts in our textbooks. In our book, we have this boring text about rubber, and the usual practice that teachers might engage in is to ask students to take turns reading aloud sentence by sentence. That's not really effective. It lets good students show off, but lower level students typically dread it and do very poorly. And it doesn't really serve to improve anyone's reading skills. But readers' theater is a way to turn ordinary prose into a dramatic play. It will take a bit of time, so you may not do it every day, but it's worth it to do occasionally. The parts assigned to different students help students recognize natural sentence divisions. They highlight sense and meaning, and all of this can lead to better reading comprehension and more speaking fluency. Here's an example of what I did for this text about rubber for a group of 4 students. The 4 parts are in 4 different colors. Notice that some sentences are divided among parts. That can help students notice pieces of sentences such as subject and verb or prepositional phrases. And instead of just reading their sentence aloud, students can be encouraged to be a bit emphatic. For example, as soon as we stop pressing, the rubber springs back to its first shape. For low-level students, the teacher can prepare the script. Advanced students can be asked to create a draft by themselves. I mean, it's still a kind of boring text. So I'm not saying that you should include it if you don't have to, but you might be required to use that textbook. And I want to show you that reader's theater works to enliven even a dull text. Here's another example for younger learners. I've written it in 4 parts, but you might also do it with 9 students, each taking 1 line. Think about this for a multi-level class. You can assign parts that might be easier, like the red part, beep, 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 to students who are at a lower level. It's helpful to coach students doing reader's theater with instructions like, be ready with your line, especially if you're finishing a sentence like, he sees 3 little yellow chickens. And I tell the students to be dramatic. Like, you're afraid, beep, beep, beep. Or runs and jumps. Or don't want to play. You can also assign a student to be the drama coach in each group. If you have time, it's good to have a sequence that gives students a chance to practice, get feedback, practice some more, and eventually perform. You can find out more about reader's theater on these sites. To sum up, we've looked at these 5 activities to get students speaking if we're forced to use traditional textbooks, and we can also find materials in them which can be adapted. As I mentioned, there are several reasons why these activities work. Scaffolding, accuracy, personalization, humor, and fun. All that means that students will remember what they've learned. I want to acknowledge Penny Her webinar for TDW inspired me to work on this topic. Thank you very much.